up here. Think happy thoughts.
All you need is one happy thought, Peter. Just one happy thought and it'll make you fly.
I got it! Not being in a slingshot would make me very happy!
Going up! Going up!
He's coming down!
Welcome to the Mad Max Minute, where we seem to have run out of ground in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1 minute at a time. I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
And today we're talking about minute 95, which begins with Aunty once again in hot pursuit of Master, and it ends with Jedediah turning off the plane. Hanging out with us this week is a regular down at the Bulldog Cafe. It's Jim O'Kane of the Rocketeer Minute.
Howdy, howdy. Welcome back. This is a nice return to a great minute. Lots of airplane stuff.
Absolutely. There are so many questions I have for this situation. But before we get to all of the plane stuff, yes, we get a good chunk of a second of supplies and debris tumbling out of the plane, but we once again go back to the burrow and find that Aunty is kicking up all sorts of dust in front of Jedediah's front door. Because they have overcome the obstacle of whatever ravine that train bridge was going over, and they have caught up. Not bad. It only took them like 3 minutes.
We don't get how they did that. Like how,
Yeah.
Mission accomplished, but not important to the story, I guess.
I had forgotten about the ravine, about that big long bridge. But yeah, how'd they get over that?
We left them behind halfway through minute 91. It's been a while. I said 3, I meant 4 minutes. And so what probably happened is that they had to go down a steep embankment, or maybe find an area where the embankment wasn't quite so steep, cross whatever ravine the bridge was going over, and then get up the other side. And somewhere along the way, they picked somebody up, but they don't get revealed just yet. We have to wait a few shots.
Suspense is killing
I know,
me.
it's so suspenseful.
I was having in my head canon that they managed to find some kind of an Evel Knievel style ramp. And just over, Snake River Canyon, the whole thing, and there they are. Now, a little bumpy, but back in front of our favorite white horse once again.
Do you think the train tracks were wide enough that they could have driven over on the train tracks?
Australia does have the same 4 feet 8.5 inches that we do for a track width, and since most cars are built that way, I guess it would fit on top of the rails if they did. If they managed to each balance on there.
It'd be really tricky, but I'm willing to bet that some of them could have pulled it off.
Maybe some of the smaller ones.
In this post-apocalyptic nightmare universe, how do you do a front-end alignment? I'm just wondering what kind of auto facilities there are out there. They do seem to be remarkably well repaired, considering all the potholes and stuff. Mm-hmm.
There must be a sect of wastelanders out there that can just align the front end of a vehicle by feel. Like they walk around the front end of the car and they're holding their hands up against the tires and the frame, and they're just like, I need to adjust this.
Yes, the tribe of Camber.
Give me a wrench. They pray to the almighty Sears catalog.
Yes.
And its automotive section.
Bring me the F-78-15s now. Yes.
I was noticing that the Blackfinger is in Auntie's truck with her, which seems like a rather prominent position to be in. So do you think he is a prominent member of society? This head mechanic?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's Mr. Goodwrench, basically. He's
Yeah, I didn't get that sense back when we saw him
Schlepping around Underworld.
Yeah, I didn't really get the sense that he was respected or prominent or had any sort of authority. But now that the structure of Bartertown is starting to fall apart a bit, it seems more obvious.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that he would be riding with Aunty because he was on the caboose when it disconnected from the train. He was there right underneath her as they were drifting away. So when the vehicle driven by one of Auntie's guards came up to get her, he would naturally hop right on.
I haven't watched the behind the scenes on all this, but I was just wondering, obviously Tina Turner, there's no rack and pinion attached to that steering wheel that she's got. Where is the driver in that vehicle? I'm assuming that it's somewhere like low down inside the center of the unit. Do you know anything how that was constructed?
From everything we've seen, that spot at the front of the car is actually where you drive.
She actually has steering capabilities?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
The problem with that vehicle is that it's very back heavy. There's not a lot of weight in the front, and so as you're trying to steer, there's not a lot of force pushing down on those steering wheels. All of your weight is in the drive, so it's not something that stays very straight very easily on its own. So all of those swerving motions that she's doing with her hands, it's not just pretend driving, it's I need to keep this thing straight, so I need to constantly adjust it.
So a lot of Tokyo Drift in the Outback. Okay. I realize that this is probably slightly sped up, but they always seem to be driving dead on into the wind. And Aunty Anthony isn't wearing goggles, so it must have been quite an adventure getting all that dust blowing up.
It's remarkable. Every time I see one of these raiders, or even Aunty herself, because there is nothing in front of Aunty, driving around at high speed in these dusty environments without any sort of eye covering.
Yeah, and the camera car is right in front of them, so it's got to be kicking up at as fast as these cars are going. The camera car is in front of them, swinging around and blowing more stuff. I mean, the only hope is that it's on a big, like a Chapman crane or something hanging off the side, and there's some major counterbalance, so at least they're not getting gravel thrown up.
There's a piece of wardrobe that Aunty is wearing around her neck that is actually designed to be worn like a visor. And it's made of that same chainmail type material, so probably little ringlets of iron or steel or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be worn in front of the face. The whole idea is that it acts as a visor so that the dust gets deflected by the chainmail and you can still very much see through it. But they don't use it because it probably wasn't transparent enough that she could see where she was going.
Yeah, or see the director waving cut or something. It's just a little difficult. But yeah, I guess it would look like the residents of SETI Alpha 5 at the beginning of Wrath of Khan. They all had those big masks and Burka-like decor. I do like the preponderance of cow catchers. I'm very much an antique steam engine maven, and just the size of the cow catchers on the far right. I don't know who's driving that one, but the car is entirely cow catcher. You just imagine what it was built to bounce off of it. Very much a killer robot style of ironwork.
It very much reminds me, now Julia, you're more of a student of history than I am. Which one of those old American steamships down in Virginia that had that Civil War battle had the steeped angular sides? Was that the Lincoln or the Monitor? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, I have no earthly idea.
Well, that's why we have
I appreciate that you thought I might know that, but I really haven't the faintest clue.
I know what you mean. Yeah, the one was just a flat top, and the other one had the steep sides. Is that? And it looks like it's made out of iron. I mean, it looks like wrought iron. Just.
I do wonder, as we start to get some really good looks at all of these vehicles over the last few minutes, how much of this design had an actual purpose and how much of it was just aesthetic. Not on George Miller's part, on the part of the individuals who own them.
I need to interrupt real quick and correct myself. Merrimack versus the Monitor in the Battle of Hampton Roads.
Yeah.
March 9th, 1862.
The Monitor went down off the coast of North Carolina, and since that was the flat top one, the other one has to be the Merrimack has to be the one that looks like the car that we're looking at, I think. I remember seeing the old Robert Ballard pictures of the Monitor. So that
the Merrimack, is that the one that's like a proto submarine?
In that most of it is underwater.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like a Hunley, but it wasn't. It just had a very low profile, and basically memory serves, they just parked across from each other for about 2 or 3 hours and bounced cannonballs, and it was kind of a draw. Early on in the war, wasn't it like at the end of it was like at the end of 1861. It was very, very early, or maybe the beginning of 62. But it was where modern warfare was going to go, and the end of wood. But and thinking about this is if you were battling other other gangs of people, you'd want to have that low profile that would deflect a shield or deflect other projectiles coming at you.
Once again, I need to correct myself because the Merrimack is the name of the steam-powered ironclad warship built by the Confederate States Navy during the first year of the American Civil War. It was taken and changed to be the CSS Virginia when it became the angular-sided ironclad ship.
Okay, so it was the Virginia when it was in the Confederate Navy.
Versus the Monitor, which was the Union.
Yeah,
so,
which would make sense because Merrimack is a river in New Hampshire. I don't think a Confederate...
Wait, no.
You're killing me.
I know, I'm killing myself.
We're going to get history right if it kills us.
It was the CSS Virginia versus the USS Monitor.
Right. But the CSS Virginia used to be the USS Merrimack.
Yes.
They were both Union Navy ships. But when the Civil War broke out, the Confederates took the Merrimack and renamed her the Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
This is what happens when brother fights against brother.
Yeah.
100 years later.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's so much that you got any Civil War battle that happened in Northern Virginia or in Maryland. The Southerners will call it by the name of the city that it was fought in, and the Northerners will call it by the nearby river that happened. So that's why you have the battle of, the first and second battle of Manassas to the south is known as the first and second battles of Bull Run to the north, or Sharpsburg. Southerners call the Battle of Sharpsburg the Battle of Sharpsburg, but the North called it the Battle of the Antietam because it was over, it was crossing the Antietam River in Maryland. So everybody wants to name it something else. So
it's just awful. I can't keep any of it straight. The important thing is the car on the far right side of the frame around second 15 has high-angled side that reminded me of the CSS Virginia, and that is what I was trying to say.
I'm picturing everybody listening to the podcast that's on a treadmill and said, "Finally." And now they're all going to have to go home, plug in their DVDs, and oh yeah, there it is. Minute 95, 21 seconds in. Yeah.
And that's not even the most important vehicle in that shot, because there is a big old ute, truck, buggy thing, whatever you want to call it. Inside that vehicle, in the center of the frame, is none other than the unkillable Ironbar, who, after falling off that bridge, is back.
Was this supposed to be a big reveal?
Are any of them supposed to be big reveals?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel about this moment where we see that Ironbar is in fact driving this ute. I mean, it doesn't surprise... Well, of course it doesn't surprise me. I've seen this movie 100 times now. But I don't think it ever surprised me. Of course he survived. Everything he's been through up till now has just prepared him for falling off of that bridge.
I feel desensitized to his deaths that we see.
I'm just amazed that his broom handle that's holding the head, the voodoo head, it never broke.
Yeah.
It's very sturdy. No matter what he goes through, it's still attached.
Knowing how ridiculous this movie is, he probably fell off that bridge, pulled some sort of ripcord in that leather girdle that he wears, and then that head probably started spinning like a helicopter. And he glided down to the ground.
Or there's a parachute packed in the back of the skull, and it just pops out. He just got it back in time to finish packing it.
Right. If we're going to insist that Ironbar is this unkillable, we might as well go whole hog with the ridiculousness of it. I was going to say maybe he fell in a bush or a tree or something like that, and that broke his fall. But nope, let's go all in on this. Might as well. You
probably have covered this in earlier minutes, but I'm just wondering, do you have a favorite resident of Bartertown?
Oh, mine is definitely Dr. Dealgood.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, we have not asked that question, and I would have to think about it.
Okay, well, maybe at the end of the minute we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular favorite, Jim?
I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you at the end of the minute. Though Ironbar really, he's the guy that everybody boos when you're at, wrestling matches. Like, ooh! He's very, I like the way he sticks to task. He always, he's very, very devoted, very, doesn't let anything interrupt him. So I think I admire that in his persistence. He's just on and on and on.
I was not on the Ironbar train at the onset of this movie because
neither was Ironbar.
Yeah.
Well, I was still very much in the Wes camp from Road Warrior.
Oh, okay.
But I will admit, Ironbar has grown on me as this movie has gone on.
All right, I figured out mine.
Okay.
It's Pig Killer.
Okay.
Oh,
He's
okay.
just so opposite what he should be. He has been sentenced to life in hard labor, and he still meets a new person and made a friend.
Yeah.
And feels some sense of loyalty to that friend. He still finds some reason, even if it's psychotic, to smile. And even now, last minute, he is bleeding out. He's gonna die if he doesn't get help. And he's still like goofy grinning in the background and still moving forward with this escape plan that he just made up on the fly. And he has faith and believes in Max. He can feel changes coming and he's just ready to roll with it. It's great.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes, there really isn't a bad character. You know, there's not a character you're like, yeah, that's not. He doesn't really add anything to the role. But it's just interesting to see where they're all headed. You know, and they wouldn't be as like the good guys wouldn't be as good if the bad guys weren't so bad. It's a nice contrast and stuff. I mean, Ironbar is just he's a real rat thing. I mean, you know, he killed Blaster and. He's the one that was wasn't he the one that sent Max off to exile? Did he put the?
He's the one that put the head on Max's shoulders and then slapped the back of the horse.
So he's
he enjoyed it.
He's like the king's hand, you know, like Game of Thrones. He does what Aunty needs. He gets it done, and that's it's such an admirable yet horrible thing that he does. You know, he's the fixer, and he's in it to the bitter end.
Speaking of moving towards the bitter end, right around the 21-second mark, we cut back to the air truck, and it is just moving along. There's nothing around it. It's just the plane, right smack dab center of the frame, with the brown earth below it, the bright blue sky above it, and it's just tootling along, not really gaining any air or anything like that.
Yeah, it doesn't look very airworthy. I mean, it's that bumblebee thing. It's just got the big. It's parked there, not ready to rotate. Doesn't have enough airspeed. So you keep thinking, well, is he going to pull it up? And watching him out there in the dust, that one of the big things in aircraft, worrying about aircraft, especially when taking off, is something called foreign object debris. And the idea of flying this thing out there and hopefully it's all dust, because if there's anything, you know, like gravel or anything, you could knock up a rock or a piece of, some kind of a broken branch or anything like that and throw it through the fuel tank or knock into the wing. So this would be one of the scariest parts of any flight. And especially, you know, just driving on an unpaved, it's really not even graded. I mean, other than by the wind. Yeah, flying. I'm assuming that this was on a carefully manicured dirt runway that they cleared carefully before they started filming that. But still, it's just kind of a nerve-wracking thing watching it.
Certainly, they were definitely helped by the natural landscape being out in the moon plains outside Cooper Petty, because it's not a true salt flat, but it is the former location of an inland sea.
Okay, similar to our Bonneville Flats, yeah.
But this specific location, in the sense of the movie, has a very interesting geographical quirk to it, and as we cut inside the plane, Jedediah Jr. is the first one to notice, and he yells for his dad to do something, and the giant mitt of a hand of Bruce Spence grabs the entire side of Jedediah Jr.'s pith helmet and pushes him aside so that Bruce Spence's face can fill the frame. And then there's this lovely thing that happens. Bruce Spence reacts to something, and the engine makes a sound in conjunction with the reaction.
It really was a nice moment.
Yeah.
And picture it, filmed for watching in a theater, and you see Bruce Spence's face filling up a 40-foot screen, and that's all you're seeing. And one of the things about being, when you're cinematography 101, when you have a close-up, you limit information because all you're seeing is a face. So all you're seeing here is the reactions of Jedediah Jr. and Jedediah Sr., that they're seeing something terrifying, and the audience at this point, until we get to the next scene, doesn't know what they're seeing. It's like, Dad, look out, but we're not seeing what it is. So all we have to go on building our own emotions is to follow their lead. So it's like, this isn't going to be fun. And finally cutting back to the wider shot where we notice that there happens to be a cliff that they're about to go over.
They've run out of land. It's ridiculous. Yeah. There's just nothing.
Well, there's plenty of land. It's just at a different altitude.
Right. It's one of those things where you've got to wonder, what could be worse than a horde of vehicles chasing you? A lack of runway is probably that thing.
And the idea of we're seeing a featureless plane. So it's this kind of a thing coming up where all of a sudden you see a cliff. There was no clue given to the audience that, by the way, it's not a plane, it's a ravine.
Yeah.
So it is just a little gotcha in the middle of the whole thing. So, and literally a cliffhanger.
So, Jim, I don't know if you have the answer to this, or we might have to figure it out together, but is there a particular reason that the plane couldn't just fly off the edge of the cliff?
Thank you. I was going to ask the same thing.
Yes, it's the Bernoulli principle. The simple matter is that you need to have enough wind going over the wing, providing lift where the lift is greater than the drag. If you don't have enough speed, the plane isn't going to lift off the runway. What you need to do, I wish Hal were here. He knows this better than I do. When you're flying, there's different speeds as you're heading down the runway. You get to a point called V1. That's where you officially run out of runway. You can no longer stop and stay on the ground. You were going to crash into the fence at the end of the runway, or in this case over the ravine at the end of the runway. But you're trying to get up to a speed called V rotate, so that when you get to that speed, the airspeed, the speed of the wind going over your wings is enough to lift the weight of your plane up off the ground, and you will, your altimeter will start moving clockwise. And rotating means you're rotating the front of the plane up toward the sky. And so if you have enough speed, when you rotate the plane, your wheels will lift up off the ground and you'll head into the air. And they never got to the V rotate speed. Fortunately, they never got to V1 speed either, because they were able to turn around. If V1 was there and V rotate wasn't there, they'd be down in a pile of rubble at it would look like the end of a Roadrunner cartoon. So, that's where they're at. So now they went back to park, and they'll have to do it all over again to get up to V1 and then V rotate, only going the other way, since that's the only direction there is any runway.
So what that tells me is that they didn't have enough time for the engine to speed up enough to pull the plane into that V1 speed.
Well, the engine could be running at full throttle. I mean, one of the first problems that they had was they didn't... It's a matter of airspeed. The engine can be running at full throttle, but if it was... You remember, it was overloaded. It had all those big nets full of stuff earlier on.
Right. And
it was getting there, but they just ran out of runway before they could get to that speed.
Gotcha.
I didn't look up what an air truck is... what their V1 speed is, but I'm assuming that it's pretty low. It seems to have a very high wing, so that means that it doesn't require a lot of lift. I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 55 to 60 miles an hour.
That doesn't sound like a lot.
If Hal is listening to this, he's probably yelling, no, it's 65. What's wrong? So, somewhere out there, expect lots of mail on your Facebook page.
I certainly hope so.
But yeah, it's probably somewhere in the 50s or 60s, and they'll pull. You just have to pull up very gently to once you're at that speed, because Bernoulli's principle does the rest, and off you go. But it's not it's not there. And then there's other factors that happen. A lot of it's dependent on temperature. A hot day. Let's say it's over 100 degrees. The air, if you think about little molecules of air bouncing around, thanks to Brownian motion, as air gets hotter, the air gets thinner because the molecules are bouncing into each other and they're moving further apart from each other. So without all that air to cause this pressure change and cause you to lift, it makes it harder for the wings. It's like you're already at altitude, so it's kind of hard to pick up off the ground if there's no wind to like cut through for the Bernoulli principle to operate.
And I'm guessing that if they had a tailwind, that would be detrimental.
Generally you want to be flying into the wind. I mean, if you've flown a kite, it's really hard to fly a kite when you're running downwind. So, I mean, if you just feel that pull, and the faster you're running, the more wind is going onto that surface and giving you lift. So that's just it. It's just a simple matter of speed and not enough wind going in their direction.
See, this would have been an excellent instance for Mr. Skyfish to tug at Max's shoulder and be like, hey, we're headed in the wrong direction. We got a tailwind. And Max would look down at Skyfish and be like, how do you know about tailwinds or anything like that? And Skyfish would be like, I'm the guy who hangs out with a kite all the time. That's my thing. I'm Mr. Skyfish.
Yeah, I see. Max could have tied a big rope. Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Put a rope on the car and we'll see what happens. But that's exactly how gliders work. You have to impart airspeed so that it goes over the wings.
One thing that is just even more mind-boggling than the idea of them suddenly running out of runway is the fact that as the plane gets turned around, a vehicle speeds up to them and stops just short of going over the cliff. And who should hop out of that vehicle, much to everybody's surprise? It's Scrooloose, wearing one of the guards' headdresses. I don't know how he caught up. I don't know where he came from. He just seems to pop out of nowhere. It's another instance of that Emperor's New Groove situation where, by all accounts, he should not have been able to catch up, but he did, ahead of Aunty and the rest of her fleet.
Way ahead.
Yeah, it must have been the shortcut, or maybe he was the first one to try out that Evel Knievel ramp that they had built. So it just kept going and going.
I'm wondering what happened to the driver of his car.
Oh, he's still in the car.
Oh, he is?
Oh, yeah. You can see the guard that Scrooloose knocked out with the frying pan half hanging out the passenger side of the truck.
Yes.
Okay.
Whatever Scrooloose did to him, he's been hit hard enough that he's not going to get up again.
Oh, well, I was worried that Scrooloose kicked him out of the car and at going a certain speed, and that could possibly have killed him.
Well, I'm certain that Max is going to drag this guy out of the car before he hops into it, but that'll be for Friday.
I do like the devotion of Scrooloose to his frying pan, and he still carries with him. I mean, never leave it behind.
Oh, absolutely. That is now his official weapon to wield.
Yeah, it's like Thor's hammer. It's just
Yes, and it's very useful.
I do like that Scrooloose has taken a trophy from his conquest. He took the headdress. I just wonder if this is the start of a dark path for Scrooloose now that he has defeated another warrior and taken his trophy, if he's going to insist on continuing that line of activity, but we'll never really know. It's just something to suppose, I guess.
Nobody's questioning, his appearance. Like, how did you get here? There's no time to request that. We just need another 150 pounds on this plane that we can't take off with.
Yeah, it's not time for questioning. It's time for Max and Savannah to run over, grab him by the suspenders, and drag him back to the plane. And as they throw him into the hold, we pan over in front of the plane and the engine just stops, which is not really something you want to have happen in this situation. And we cut inside the cockpit, and Jedediah Jr. and Sr. are just sitting there looking away at what's ahead of them.
A great family portrait, too. I mean, again, another representation of beautiful cinematography. They're perfectly lit, nicely framed, and just, gosh, if they weren't facing certain doom, you'd swear that could look good on somebody's mantelpiece.
Absolutely. So we cut down to Max. This is very close to the end of the minute, but he's looking up at the cockpit with an expression that says to me, why are we stopping? What's going on? I need to investigate, which is exactly what he decides to do as he pulls back and starts walking around the tail end there. You definitely get the sense that Max is concerned. They're running for their lives at this instance, and stopping is not something that he wants to see happen.
And doing a lot of rapid calculations of what are my options here? How do I save the most amount of people in this?
I'm sure he's thinking ahead to perhaps we're going to have to take that truck. How many people can I fit on that truck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe looking at the mental map of where they're at. Can he take the truck down into the ravine? Can they split up and meet up later?
Splitting up worked in the last movie,
Yeah, that's true.
but in this instance, might be a little tricky. There are just so many of them and so few of Max and the waiting ones and Jedediah and all them. The odds are very intimidating, and we are not so much caught between a rock and a hard place. We're more caught between a hard place and a worrying lack of rock. If I can be so ridiculous as to say that.
Well, and yes, and an army of armored vehicles all looking like Civil War battleships coming at them.
Exactly. Boy, if there was any one subject that we never have to touch on again.
Oh, you know,
it's
you
that
say
one.
that.
Boy.
An interesting parallel to the subject we were talking about earlier with the two different ships and the Merrimack that was captured by the South and then was called the Virginia. It's exactly the same thing that happened with this particular truck that Scrooloose just pulled up on.
Mm-hmm.
It did belong to the North, and now it belongs to the South.
I do see it as a bit of poetic justice that Max began the movie with this truck. It was taken from him by Jedediah, and now here at the end of the movie, he is leaving the plane flown by Jedediah to once again reclaim his camel truck. There's a nice bit of symmetry there. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
But we'll worry about all of that reclaiming of vehicles on Friday. Jim, we hope you'll come back and join us then.
I certainly will.
So keep an ear out for that. Max will find out exactly why Jedediah has shut off the plane. And despite his protests and assertions that they cannot take off, Max will assure them that the runway will be clear enough when the time comes. So for all of that, come back at the end of the week. The Mad Max Minute podcast is a fan project by Rick and Julia Ingham.
The Mad Max franchise was created by George Miller and Byron Kennedy, is presented by Kennedy Miller Mitchell Productions, and distributed by Warner Brothers.
Mad Max Minute is produced and edited by Rick Ingham. Our opening music is Verdi's Dies Irae by Daniel Batista of danielbatista.com. And our outro music is We Don't Need Another Hero by MilitiaVox of militiavox.com.
Our home on the internet is madmaxminute.com. You can follow us on Twitter at madmaxminute, like us on Facebook by searching for Mad Max Minute, and join our Facebook listener group, Mad Max Minute Beyond Microphone.
If you'd like to support the podcast, visit madmaxminute.com, where you can check out our TeePublic storefront by clicking the store link, join our Patreon by clicking the support link, or make a one-time donation by clicking the donate link.
Thank you for joining us for minute 95 of Beyond Thunderdome. We'll see you next time.
Everybody